What's up everybody and welcome to another video. This is the second part of my Witcher review. You can go check out the first part right here to really get the full scope of how I'm feeling about this. I'm just gonna get into it because, you know, all that intro stuff I did in the first part. So again, I'm going to be breaking down this review into the episodes, the individual episodes, and of course, before we get started, this is a spoiler review. I will be talking about major spoiler moments, so if you haven't finished the series, essentially, go finish it and then come back. Other than that, let's get started. So starting off with the 5th episode, one thing that really kind of caught me by surprise almost was how funny it was. Like, there were real comedic moments that I was laughing out loud at. A lot of it came from Jaskier. I was like, this is what Jaskier's role is mostly, right? Is comedic relief and kind of that annoying foil character to Geralt. I thought the banter between Geralt and Yennefer, especially during the bathtub scene, was near perfect. Like, they perfectly captured the way that they're just constantly trying to one-up each other and they're always trying to stay ahead, like one step ahead of the other one until one of them caves in, and you kind of saw that with Geralt. I thought we also got a lot of character building from Yennefer. We really got a sense of her motivations. One of them is that she wants to somehow get back her ability to bear children. The other one is that she just wants to be the most powerful mage on the continent ever. And that actually, the latter motivation is kind of what defines her from this point. Now on to what I think could have been improved. The pacing was quite an issue. Now, I know I talk about pacing a lot, but only because it's really important, and it's kind of a bullshit aspect of filmmaking and TV, because it's one of those aspects that when you get pacing right, nobody is going to call it out. Nobody's going to say, wow, the pacing was great. Okay, sometimes they will, but most of the time, the average moviegoer or TV audience, they don't notice the pacing. But if you get it wrong, that's when everybody's like, oh, this is so slow, this is terrible, the pacing is terrible. You know, so I'm not going to fault them too much on this, but I definitely think because it was a consistent issue throughout these last 4 episodes, I think it could have been improved. And I think one of the reasons why the pacing was a bit slower is the dialogue. Now, I don't want to compare the show to Game of Thrones because there are very little comparisons to draw, but this aspect of dialogue, I think, can be a valuable comparison. The first 2 seasons of Game of Thrones, when you read it on script, it's just conversations, people talking, right? Like literally just people talking. But that's actually what makes the pacing great, is because the dialogue is so witty, it's so snappy, it's so full of character. It's the type of dialogue that you're always hanging on the last word and you're always paying attention and captivated. The dialogue in this show, in The Witcher, it's not as great as it could be. Obviously, you do have the moments, like I said, of banter between Geralt and Yennefer, and also Geralt and Jaskier, but all the other characters, not so much, right? And also, Game of Thrones had such a colorful cast of characters with such different personalities, different motivations, different storylines and stuff, and this show doesn't really have such a large cast, and also such a variety in personalities. And the thing about pacing is that it's just all about audience engagement. You know, making sure that the audience is never bored, right? Which is why, again, pacing is kind of bullshit, because when you get the pacing right, the audience is never bored, theoretically, and so they won't notice anything different. But when they're bored out of their mind because the pacing is terrible, that's when they really notice it. So yeah, that's an issue that I thought was with this episode and also the following episodes. But on to episode 6. Again, a great thing that stood out to me was the comedy. There weren't as many comedic moments, but when there were, they hit pretty well, and again, they mostly came from Jaskier. Again, we also had some more character building with Yennefer. In this episode, we find out that the reason why she wants to get back her ability to give birth is because the choice was taken away from her. And there's a lot of discussion and conversation between Geralt and Yennefer about choice. Geralt did not choose to be a Witcher, yet he still does it, and Yennefer's choice of giving birth was taken away from her. They also had a lot of discussion about being different and how terrible humans are, especially to those who are different from them. And it's like, yeah, that's true. very true. We get a sense of how the relationship develops and progresses, especially at the end when Yen finds out that Geralt wished for them to be together. Now, as much as I like this episode, there were also a lot of things that could have been improved that stood out to me. It's like in my notes, it's kind of balanced between the positives and the negatives. I still enjoyed the episode, but there were definitely things that could have been improved. Again, pacing was an issue, but it took form specifically in forced emotional scenes. I'm talking specifically about that scene after they think Borch 3 Jackdaws dies, falls to his death, and the two warriors he was with. I mean, it was pretty sad, I guess, but the audience hasn't spent enough time with Borch, and we haven't seen the relationship between Borch and Geralt and Jaskier develop enough to justify why they would feel this way. Right, especially Jaskier. He had like this monologue that just stood out to me, and I was like, nah, it's not really doing anything for me. Another thing was that I thought the action was too chaotic. Like this time it was hard to follow. I didn't really know what was going on. In this final fight scene, I thought I just didn't know what was going on, who was fighting who, and I don't think it was intentional because it wasn't a big battle like the battle outside of Sintra. Like I thought it should have been more easy to follow, really to see how badass Geralt and Yen can fight together. Because Yen is like this super badass sorceress and Geralt is a super badass witcher. And then the two badass Zerrikanian warriors were there too. It was just so hard to follow that I couldn't get any sense of that badassery. And I think again, like I said in my critique of episode 2 in part 1, they were juggling too many storylines. But now I realized they were not just juggling storylines, they were also juggling timelines, because they kept switching back between present day series storyline and way in the past Geralt and Yennefer. I was definitely able to comprehend the time jumps and storyline jumps, and I'm certain most people who watch the show did as well. But when it takes an audience a while to understand and comprehend all these time jumps and storyline jumps, it kind of leaves a bad taste in your mouth. Like you're thinking they could have done that better, they could have sequenced it better or structured it better in a way that would have helped me understand what was going on quicker, right, and easier. On to episode 7. I don't actually have a lot to say on this episode. It was just like, yeah, okay. And that's not really a bad thing. I still enjoyed it, but nothing really stood out to me in particular. I did, however, like the tie-ins between the first episode and this episode, and seeing that Geralt was there during the siege of Sintra. Now this one, I did actually notice that the pacing was good. I was never bored at any moment. Yeah, I was never bored. I was always engaged, and I always wanted to know what was going to happen next. All right, so good pacing. I personally like when characters have discussions about politics and war, especially in a medieval setting. That's one of the reasons why I love Game of Thrones so much. And we kind of got a sense of that when the Brotherhood was discussing if they were going to handle the Nilfgaardians advancing aggressively towards the north. And again, we got some more character building from Yennefer, returning to the school that made her who she is, but also kind of took the thing that she wanted away from her, which was the ability to bear life. You definitely get the sense that she hates the place, but I mean, again, it made her who she is. It helped her harness her chaos. However, I did not understand why she got those girls essentially high. I don't know why she got them high. I really didn't understand what the use of that scene was. Also, in terms of Yen's character building, we kind of got a sense of her realizing that her impulsiveness and what she did, stealing Fringilla's place at Edirne's court forcibly, it has major consequences. I also felt like the ending with Ciri was a little bit lackluster. Like I expected more glowing eyes, but that could be budget reasons. Like they didn't have enough budget to make the VFX look really extravagant and really go all out on Ciri's power. Yeah. Okay, finally on to episode 8, the season finale. This one, I definitely felt for a season finale could have been improved. But let's start off with the good again. First of all, I don't know what got me so freaking hyped about that intro, but I was hype. Like that intro was straight up epic. Like when all the logos of the previous episode blend into the wolf, the swallow, and Yan's obsidian star. I thought I was so hyped. And I also I really enjoyed the 1v1 between Vilgefortz and Kahir. I thought that was really epic. And then it turns out Vilgefortz is working for Nilfgaard. Now here's the thing about this season finale. It portrays the Battle of Sodden Hill. I actually don't know. I don't remember if Sapkowski actually has like a story or a section dedicated to the Battle of Sodden Hill. All I really remember is that characters just reference it as like a really bloody massacre on both sides. The Nilfgaardians won, but a Pyrrhic victory. And it wasn't just the mages defending the north. It was like Temeria and Edirn, I think, and maybe Kedwin. Which is why I don't know why Foltest at the end just shows up with his army. Like he just shows up and then that's it. They don't do anything more with him in the episode. And just the battle overall, it was a bit unepic, I must say. For how epic the intro was, the battle itself wasn't that epic. Like I definitely liked seeing the mages and their powers and like how they use the powers to try and stop the Nilfgaardian army. It just really wasn't that, it was just not epic. But the thing is, I actually don't know if it could have, because I am assuming that most of the reasons why they couldn't have done what the Battle of Sodden Hill really showed was budget reasons. Like they didn't have the budget to show a big open battle between one huge Nilfgaardian army and like several Northern Kingdom armies with a bunch of mages as well. So there's not just sword fighting and melee combat and archers and siege weapons probably, but also magic. And they couldn't really show a brutal massacre with all those extras and all the CGI because they didn't have enough money for it, right? You can definitely tell in the VFX, like TV show VFX are never that great, and so I really think they should have saved the Battle of Sodden Hill for a later season when they did have the budget to do the epic battle justice. I also think that they kind of rushed Geralt's storyline in this episode, and especially because this is a really big moment. Like everything leading up to him eventually meeting up with Ciri just by chance or by destiny, I guess. Like it's so like you need it. He definitely had those scenes of like the flashback with his mom, but they rushed it and they didn't give enough time for it. And this actually bleeds into an issue that I think is an overall season problem. I don't think structurally they should have done one story per episode. The short stories really give you such an in-depth look into Geralt, Yen, all the other characters, all the cast of characters that we are going to be familiar with from the moment that the real main series starts going forward. And so by the time the main series starts and by the time the real story kicks off, you really have this intimate familiarity with these characters because of all the important details you got about them and their motivation and their personality and their character, how they view the world, all that stuff in the short stories. And so I really think they should have taken more time. Like 8 episodes actually I think is perfect, because I think there are only like 4 or 5 short stories per book of the first 2 books. So they could have done like 2 episodes per story. They really, I felt, left out some important details in the stories that were not only important to the kind of the emotional resonance of the story, but also giving the audience a look into the characters. Most shows just start out straight up with the story and they go, and then you learn about the characters as their journey goes on. But in this one, we kind of have the advantage of seeing these characters in different time periods and different circumstances before the main story kicks off, so that we know who these characters are by the time the story kicks off. And I just felt like they rushed a lot of it because they didn't dedicate enough time for each story. So yeah, that's kind of a main issue with the structure of the whole season in general. But overall, loved it. I still really enjoyed this and was extremely satisfied. As a huge fan of the Witcher franchise, I was really satisfied with what they did in this season. In terms of the first 4 episodes versus the last 4, I would give the first 4 an 8 out of 10 because I thought they were so spot on, so good. So many aspects of it are so good. And then these last 4 episodes, 6 out of 10. Could have been improved, but I still enjoyed it. That brings us to a median score of 7 out of 10 for the first season of The Witcher on Netflix. Wow. If you guys like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you have something to say in response to my comments or otherwise, leave some in the comments down below. And I want to give a very special shout out and say thank you to my patrons on Patreon. So appreciated those donations are. And finally, if you want to support me, subscribe and see more content like this. Other than that, I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye!